While I was in the process of working on the script for the previous video about Astrobot, I did clearly took some time. I needed to come up with some ideas and finish my edits. And in these few days, yes, I did watch some movies that were of a mild interest to me. So in this time, I did watch a lot of vampire movies in preparation for Nosferatu, which by the way was phenomenal. Probably my favorite movie last year. And out of the countless vampire films that I watched, one of them really rose up to the occasion, and that was actually Interview with the Vampire. There are numerous things that this movie does amazingly, and this movie is kind of, in my mindset, a little bit overhated. But I think the most important is how it really approaches the topic of immortality, because I think it does it in a unique way, and it comes across a lot more sophisticated than other vampire movies, despite its sort of raunchy approach. So in this movie, Lestat and Louis, who are very much not in love with each other, they're both vampires. They decide to get a child. Basically, while this child is dying, Louis saves her by biting her, so now their daughter is sort of forced to stay this 12 years old forever. And now this is not that unique of a concept in itself. It's in like countless things. Like Eternals, there was that one character who I genuinely cannot bother Googling because I don't remember anything else about that movie. And then of course there's like Number 5 in Umbrella Academy. But what I find particularly interesting is that not only does the daughter have to live with forever being 12, but Louis also has to live with the fact that he put this burden onto this kid himself. And this got my mind really thinking, you know, what's the deal with immortality? And more importantly, what's really the deal with death? Like, how, not in a gloomy way or whatever, but rather I was just pondering almost. I have come to the terms with death, for the most part at least. How did I come to the terms with death and the ideas? And how does anyone just accept death? Like, why should I have to die? Why can it all just end? And this got me really interested. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. In thanatology, thanatology, which is the study of death and dying, and I really was not that disappointed in my research because I found so much great resources and a ton of fascinating questions surrounding the beliefs regarding death. But to begin with, we're gonna look at what is probably the most well-known religions, especially in the West, and that would be Christianity, which is largely known as the religion of redemption. Regardless of one's beliefs, Christianity always holds, really in my mind, the core theme of redemption. And may it be through confession or prayer or even just having faith in God, from the perspective of one who has lived like a worthless life of regrets, all you would really need to do is accept with all your heart, soul, mind, body, Jesus as your savior, and everything will be forgiven. You'll die. You'll go to the pearly gates of heaven. And I've sort of seen this firsthand while at a retirement home. There was a priest almost always there, available to help people, obviously in their final moments, and offer prayers to guide them into heaven. And honestly, I mean, can you really blame them? If I am on my deathbed, I would cover all of my bases too, just in case. Whether you fully buy into the religious framework or not, there's something almost really comforting about the idea that you die and it's not all over, and you go to this amazing place with a bunch of other people you miss. Now I'm gonna pivot here because I don't think it would be a true philosophy video if I didn't at least touch on existentialism. And existentialism has actually a lot to say about this topic. I know existentialism is seen as a bit of a downer because it focuses heavily on the absurdity of life. But there's a lot of it that when you really dive into it, it has a really refreshing take, especially on death. So existentialism states that all mental and physical beings end with death and that it's a given. But it doesn't really stop with its process there. The philosophy goes on to sort of say that death is the alternative to life. It's the opposite. It's the antithesis. And it even makes what I think is a really bold claim. And that voluntary death lets you find your own alternative to life. And if you don't take that route, then you have to find a new meaning to life. And what's really interesting about that is that it sort of forces you to confront death in a way that's really uncomfortable, but it really makes you think. In a way, it's not about death itself. It's about how you live with the knowledge of it. And when you realize that life is finite, you might be able to find a deeper appreciation for it. Or at least that's how I would view this quote. I think there's a lot of different interpretations. But one thought that has always popped up as I dug deeper into thanatology was sort of the idea of whether dying is always even bad, because it deprives us of the potential future. But others, like existentialists, suggest that it's not always so black and white. In fact, if life is an endless cycle of suffering and dissatisfaction, then maybe death is not the worst thing that could happen to us. Take the example of immortality. Like I mentioned in Interview with the Vampire, we see the pain of endless life. Living forever can start to feel like a curse, especially when your body is trapped in a child's form and your loved ones grow old and die around you. This idea really challenges the typical view that more life is always better. It opens the door for a much more nuanced discussion about what makes life meaningful and whether the inevitable could actually be a release. So what does this tell us about how we think about death? Well, to me, it's clear. No one can really know what happens after we die. The only thing we know for certain is that it does happen and those people are not coming back. But whether it's the Christian idea of redemption, the Hindu belief in reincarnation, or the existentialist philosophy that challenges us to really find meaning in the face of death, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. But one thing for certain is that death is something we all must face, and maybe that's why we've built so many different ways to understand it, to sort of make it less scary and more meaningful, or even comforting in some way. For me, understanding death through these different lenses does not make it feel less real. It helps me approach it with curiosity more so than fear, and maybe that's all we can do. Live with the knowledge that one day we will all die, but in the meantime, we've got to find meaning in what time we have.